All right, well, my name is Keith Wingy, and I'm with Missouri Main Street Connection, and we're excited to be back in Delmar. It's always a great experience. We've been here since Sunday, really, but we started work on Monday, meeting with various sites and property owners, and so you're going to see some of the great recommendations that our team has. But the Delmar folks did a great job of setting the stage for kind of where we've been and where we're going, so that's going to kind of make mine a little more brief, which is great because we want to see all the picture stuff. But we started this pilot program, Urban Maine, here in Missouri. Actually, in like 2014, 2015, we started gathering information from districts in St. Louis that were interested in this Main Street thing that they had heard about. And so gathered information. Bob Lewis, here in the audience, our board member, he and I started meeting with various districts and just having conversations. What were the needs and how could we help with Main Street? But we needed to build capacity as Missouri Main Street in order to do this. And so we were happy to announce that Dutchtown was our first pilot urban Main Street program, which we've rebranded as St. Louis Main Streets. And we're very excited to get started with Dutchtown, and then of course a pandemic happened. And so that delayed a lot of the in-person meetings and we moved virtual. But they are moving ahead and in fact have been doing some great things, and we were there Tuesday evening. Then we added Laclede's Landing, and then shortly after we added Delmar Main Street. And we were here, let's see. This is our team. I'll let Randy and Joe introduce themselves when we get there. Russ Volmert is the other member of our team, landscape architect, urban planner. Unfortunately, his day job took him away today, and he didn't have control over that, but you're going to see his handiwork. Joe's going to present that and see some of his designs. But this is where we've been so far with Delmar. So in May, the application, the district applied, an application, a review process. In June, we accepted them. In October, we did some board development and training to help get them started. We were here on site in November and did an assessment, and I recognized many faces from that November meeting. Lots of good information gathered from the community, from the various district stakeholders. I think we met with over 100 people through the various stakeholder group meetings, so that was very good. And so we're back here in March with design and development workshop. And so what we're doing through this process is helping build a Main Street program, like Brandon said, build that comprehensive approach to revitalization. And Main Street's been in existence for over 40 years, and there have been urban Main Street programs in Baltimore and Boston for decades. And so we're using them as resources also as we work through this pilot program here in St. Louis. And so this summer, what we're working towards is coming up with transformation strategies, which is National Main Street's fancy words for goals and priorities. What are we going to focus on in the district? We can't focus on everything at one time. So what are we going to focus on over the next 2 to 3 years? And then we're going to use that Main Street 4-point approach for implementation. And so we're building a Main Street plan for the Delmar Main Street District and the Delmar Main Street organization that then will help us with implementation, finding the right partners, finding financing, those sorts of things as we move forward. And so we're hoping to present that in the fall and then begin the fun work of implementation. So this summer, though, we're going to work through some educational components. The National Main Street Conference is in May in Richmond, Virginia. And it's always very exciting to meet with about 1,500 other Main Streeters from across the country and learn from specialists that are doing this work across the country, and that's always good. Our state conference is in July. It's in Kansas City this year. I'm sorry, yes, Bob is correcting me. For 15 years, our conference has been the last week of July. This year, it is the first week of August. Thank you, Bob. So hope that some of you can make that over in Kansas City. And then we're going to work on, as I said, that transformation strategy and building that Main Street plan. So I am going to turn it over to Joe Borgstrom. I'll get you a microphone.
Oh, sweet. While I'm making that switch, I just want to make you aware, we're recording this, and both what you see and what you hear, and at some point in the next 24 hours, we'll convert it to a movie, upload it to YouTube, and that'll allow anyone who was unable to attend today, you can provide them that link, and they can see and hear everything that's said this morning.
Good morning, everybody. As Keith introduced me, my name is Joe Borgstrom. I'm a principal of the firm Place and Main Advisors. We're based out of East Lansing, Michigan. My background, this is unusual for me to do, a little bit of a treat for me to do this today, is to present some of the concepts for the vacant properties that we've visited. I am not a landscape architect. Russ Volmert from our team did all the nice pictures you're going to see today. My role is as a development finance specialist. So myself and my teams over my career have helped leverage local and state incentives to the tune of about $2.2 billion of private reinvestment into real estate projects. So my job is really the spreadsheets, and you are not going to enjoy spreadsheets. I guarantee you that this morning. So you're going to enjoy the pictures. I'll talk a little bit about math here towards the end of my presentation before I hand it over to Randy. But we really wanted to focus on this design. When we actually altered the name slightly, because I believe here everybody talked about it being a design workshop. We included the word development because we think this is really important to talk about some of the economics, and I'll talk about that here in just a second. But we focused on these three sites, and I'll go into these in more detail in just a second. And then Randy did an excellent job. I cannot wait for you guys to see the transformation that Randy is proposing for the buildings that he worked with while we were here. But really, what I want to jump into right away is these vacant properties, and that was alluded to earlier. The first one is 5900 Delmar Boulevard. Currently a vacant site. It abuts one of the city parks, and it has development on each side. This is what the site looks like from above. And what I also wanted to contrast it with is, I think by popular thought that is one lot, and it is not. When you start looking at the actual lot lines, there are two lots here, and the lot actually includes that side street of Hamilton Avenue as part of the property itself. So that lends itself to some really interesting ideas. One of the things that we're proposing for this lot in particular is a short-term use and then a intermediate to long-term use. So the short-term use, one of the things that was shared with us is that this lot has been particularly used as kind of a default community space on Delmar Avenue, that there is no formal public space along the boulevard. And so one of the things that we wanted to do for a short-term use is to use this clear site as kind of a micro retail village. And so the proposal here is for several shipping container pop-up stores to allow entrepreneurs to test their business models. Probably retail would be most likely. We have a spot on the lower part for food trucks to be able to pull up, so we can continue to enhance this space as kind of a quasi public space. And then to improve the connection there along Hamilton Avenue graphically to be able to connect people to the park. It feels very separate when you see the city park there. It feels like there was a definite kind of wall, even though there's a chain link fence and then there's the guardrail at the end of Hamilton Avenue. It feels very separate. We want to remove those barriers, and maybe the guardrail comes down and bollards go up instead. Something that becomes more easy to interact with. And so we are introducing the thought of having printed street graphics along Hamilton Avenue to help guide people. And the thought of shoes was very intentional, so we can increase foot traffic. Get it? We're very creative. But this idea of creating this pedestrian walkway that connects us to the park, we provide a temporary space for entrepreneurs to kind of explore. Micro retail, we're seeing this all over the country pop up. We think this is a really good opportunity to help grow your own from an economic development standpoint. So it's not just about how do we attract new businesses, but how do we help provide a space for local entrepreneurs from the neighborhoods to be able to come here and be able to have that space to be able to try out that. So that's the short term. The short term would be that we would probably use this for a year or two as we get to a point. And then we look at what could possibly go there. And so this is an aspirational photo, what we'd like to eventually see on that site. And I'll give you a better overview here from an aerial standpoint. We want to maintain that connection and that walkway, but eventually put essentially a 4-story property on that building with commercial on the first floor and 3 floors of residential. That equals out to about 8,500 square feet per floor for 4 floors for a total of 34,000 square feet of additional additional real estate into the area. Now, this would have to go along with, at some point, too, thinking about formalizing a different spot as a more formal gathering area along the boulevard. We don't want to take that away from the community, but the idea that we could potentially use this as a more productive spot on the boulevard. Our next spot is 620 Union Avenue. This is at the corner of Union and Delmar. It's a really interesting spot. So one of the things that I'll talk about in a little bit about the economics is the zip codes. So Union Avenue is the zip code dividing line between the east side and the west side. And that has very dramatic meaning in terms of your market numbers, and I'll talk about that in a second. But this was 620 Union Avenue. This spot right there is a former gas station. It's adjacent to two houses that are probably not in the best of condition. I know that there's some thoughts about what to go north of there, so we're not going to comment on the rest of that. But what we do want to talk about is this space in particular at 620. We had a very productive meeting with one of the owners. What we want to propose there is something not just a one-story. We're actually proposing a two-story commercial property there. And what we want to see is a cafe, or cafe/convenience. I want to be very clear that we're not talking about a party store or anything like that. We're talking about having a cafe. One of the benefits of this site, as we look at from an aerial view, is there's a potential for a Metro bus mobility hub, an enhanced area right there. So we think that this would be a really good spot for a cafe/market, for folks to be able to, on their way to or from the bus stop, be able to stop in. One of the things I want to show, the aspirational thing, I love the idea of having two apartments, about 800 square feet, which is about normal for the area. And then having a rooftop deck, having something for residents to be able to enjoy. So something that would really enhance the area. You can see that we've got, the Ameren transformers are there at the bottom. You can see kind of we have things laying off where you'd have the pull-in from Delmar Avenue, but it's built, to increase density along the boulevard. So something that would be real close to both the corner of Delmar and Union. Lastly, and when it comes to the vacant properties, is 4933 Delmar Boulevard, which is one of the more interesting lot lines I think we've seen in quite some time. I'll give you an aerial view of this. This is the spot we've referred to as kind of the spot next to Aldi. When you look at the property lines, this is how this lays out. And it's really interesting because you've got the rest of these two buildings, and unfortunately I didn't include this in the photo, but you've got traditional 5-6-story buildings a little bit farther down the boulevard, and while the west part of here along North Kings Highway is very auto-oriented, very kind of post-World War II, 70s, 80s, type of development. What we're looking at doing is we want to see something more along the lines of a 7-story facility, and one of the ideas we have for this is either residential with mixed use with commercial on the first floor, or the potential for a Airbnb type of hotel. Which is a relatively new concept, that it's not fully staffed. It's not a flag hotel like a Marriott, but it's more of a boutique where it's you're looking at several units where it is literally kind of an Airbnb situation where instead of being a standard hotel room, which is between 400 and 600 square feet, it's more 800, 900 square feet. So it's for either extended stays or at least for those folks who prefer to go with the kind of the Airbnb route. This kind of would be how it lays out. We anticipate having parking there to the front, and then you could have connection with outdoor dining on the street side, and then you can see kind of how it lays out from there. This would be 7 stories, by the way, at 8,500 square feet per floor, which lays out to 59,500 square feet of new real estate into the district. So very inspirational stuff. Now the bad news. So I know that we have several developers in the room, and anything I'm about to tell you is not news to them. But we wanted to present these to the group so you can understand the challenges that the development community is having. And I think that there's a lot of times and I'm not saying that this is the case here. It happens everywhere else I work. I'm sure it doesn't happen here. That sometimes that there's a little bit of distrust between the development community and the community at large. And what I want to be able to do is provide some validation here to say that some of the challenges that you're hearing from developers are true challenges. And I want to give you a couple of examples. The 3 biggest challenges that we see for new construction, and this is not just in the district itself, we see this as new construction issues everywhere. That the cost of construction per square foot, we've heard is about $300 per square foot. I would love to hear from the developers, and I know, first of all, if you know developers, I've worked with developers my entire career, I love you guys, but none of you want to talk about your cost per square foot in front of other developers. So I would love to have conversations with you elsewhere to see whether or not that $300 per square foot for construction is indeed accurate or within the realm. And then from there are no direct incentives. When we talk about historic when we talk about historic structures, the historic buildings, a lot of the properties that you have in the district may be eligible for historic tax credits. That's a big deal in the development finance world. And I'll give you an example about why that's a big deal here in a second. And then lastly, the really weird part, as I mentioned earlier, that zip code dividing line, as we pulled comparable rent rates for the district, there was a defined drastic change in rent rates once you got to Union Avenue. West of Union Avenue, that rent rate dropped to 50 cents per square foot, $1.30 to $1.31 per square foot for residential. To the east, it was $1.81. So it's a 50-cent drop. Now, that doesn't sound like a whole lot in the grand scheme of things, but when it comes to rental real estate, that is huge. Now, the other bad news I have about this is because of that $300 per square foot, $1.81 per square foot for residential doesn't get it done either. And so we've got some challenges that we want to talk about as it relates to that. So let's talk about cost of construction real quick. I want to give you the first example that we gave you at 5900 Delmar Boulevard. 4 stories, 8,500 square feet per floor. That works out to about $10.2 million in new construction. I heard audible, yeah, you guys know I'm not lying. Those were developers that made that noise, by the way. They know this is pretty accurate. So typically what's requested of developers, 20% equity, right? 20% down, that's typical real estate, $2 million. So that means you're looking at a mortgage on a property of $8.1 million. So typically what we see on average is about 6% for a loan rate, and if developers are getting less than 6%, count yourself lucky. At a 20-year, what we call a 20-year amortization rate, when we think about our own home mortgages, we typically do 30 or 15. 20 is what we typically see in the real estate world. That comes down to a monthly mortgage payment of $58,000 a month. If that doesn't make you pucker a little bit, it should, because that's a lot of money. Now, then we want to talk about, all right, what about rent rates? What about those things? Well, I'll show you what that impact is here in just a second. But I want to show you because the important part here for me is that loan amount. On a $10.2 million project, you've got to take out a loan on $8.1 million. That is a huge amount to be able to have on a real estate loan of any size. So I want to show you kind of the impact of incentives here. So construction, cash equity, all these numbers we just talked about, your mortgage payment of $58,000. Now, if we're going to contrast that with a historic building, as an example, one that's on the National Register, let's say it's the same project budget. Let's say it's $10.2 million. You got cash equity of $2 million, but then you get federal historic tax credits. Now again, if you're a developer in this room, what I'm about to show you is I will acknowledge, a gross oversimplification of how all this stuff works. And every developer in the room will nod emphatically saying, yes, Joe, this is a gross simplification of this. But I wanted to get the point across for those of you who aren't in real estate finance. So federal tax credits, just using whole numbers, 20% federal tax credit, 25% state tax credit. That means your loan is now going from $8.1 million to 3.5. That is a drastic difference in a monthly mortgage payment. When we talk about the challenges of new construction, why hasn't the market done it yet? This is why the market hasn't done it. The numbers don't work. It's what we refer to as a gap. And per project, that gap could be anywhere from $1 million to $3 million, who knows? It all depends on the individual aspects of each particular project. So let's talk about rent rates real quick. So if you want to pay for that, you've got to charge a certain amount, right? If we do that, I want to show you the zip code of, I've been referring to them as 112 and is it 108? Yeah, 108 as the two zip codes. Here's the lease rates on average, based on comparables from this year, based on 25 different units that have been for rent in 2022. So this is very fresh data. You're looking at $1.30 to $1.31 per square foot, whether it's 1 or 2 bedroom, And then the same, you're looking at $182 for a 1 or 2 bedroom on the east side of Union. When I talk about that monthly mortgage, and even if we're talking about 40 units, it's not enough. And so I'll show you real quick. So we're going to use that same example of 5900 Delmar. 4 stories. We're not talking about the Taj Mahal, right? We're talking about a nice development, but not overly extravagant. Thank you. That was the word I was looking for. We've been together all week. You know what I'm going to say before I say it. So in that case, we had 20 units, 1 bedroom, 800 square feet, $1,120 a month. 4 units, 1 bedroom, at 1,000 square feet. And if you're a developer, you get this kind of weird thing because sometimes you have leftover square footage. And so you just kind of put it in a unit that looks a little bit bigger. And then we did 12 units at 1,100, 12 two bedrooms at 1,100 square feet for 1,500. And then we had a commercial portion, right? Remember we were talking about the mixed use? 4 units at $15 a square foot, which is about average in the area from what we've seen, the comps we've been able to gather. And then we assumed that there might be a fully built out restaurant. So 3,000 square feet, restaurants tend to lease at a higher square footage, price per square footage. So you're looking at $5,000 a month. That's a total monthly revenue of $57,000 if everything's leased up and everybody's paying on time. Now, if you manage real estate, you realize that once you have that money, it doesn't just go in your pocket. You've got ongoing expenses. You've got to pay taxes, you've got to pay management companies, you've got to do all this other stuff. And typically at a monthly operating fee, you see that percentage is anywhere between 35 and say 60% of your revenue per month. I was being generous and said 35%. We'll go on the low end. That's $20,000 a month. That means that that property is bringing in $37,500 a month. Remember that mortgage payment? That means a project like that would lose $20,000 a month. So we've got to find some way to fill those gaps. We've got to find some way to make that work. So there's a couple of ways to do this. We know that there are groups around St. Louis that can help make some of this stuff happen. We know that there are nonprofits that do reduced lending. We know that there's the potential for grants. We need to bring those people to the table as we explore these projects. But do it in a coordinated manner because there are a number of developers who are in this room, and we don't want everybody going at them at the same time. We want to have a coordinated ask. So the idea around grants, equity partners who are willing to take a negative return. Now that sounds crazy, probably because it is. But if your choices are between a grant, 100% grant, or a 10 or 20% loss of your principal, that 10 or 20% loss of your principal still gets you 90 to 80% of your principal back. So it might be an easier ask for somebody to come and take a haircut on an equity investment than it will be to do a full-out grant. Just an idea. Lower financing rates. I mentioned that 6%. If there's anybody else who's out there willing to do a reduced first, second, or third mortgage, so you can break up some of that, what we call the capital stack, some of those avenues for funding. Now, I will tell you, a lower second or third mortgage is not how second and third mortgages work. So you're not going to find a bank do that. Typically, a second and third mortgage is a higher percentage because it's more risky. But again, we need to find some sort of group or some sort of mechanism to step in there. I was jokingly referring to it as Uncle Lewis, who could potentially step in with money this week. But this idea that there's the potential to find these additional sources. And then lastly, the other potential is if we're going to raise rates, then the potential to subsidize those, you still raise those rates, but subsidize. I don't like this suggestion because when we raise rates dramatically, even if we did that $1.80 to $1.30, if we raise that $1.30 to $1.80 per square foot, that's going to force gentrification. So we don't want to displace the residents who are already here. We want to make sure that this is something that folks are still going to benefit from. So that means the rent rates, we've got to try to keep within reason. And even in that example where I was giving you about the apartments, I raised it to $1.40, and I felt like that was a little high. So there's issues that we've got to deal with here when it comes to the real estate, when it comes to the financial gap. But I say that not to depress everybody, not to be the wet blanket, not to pour cold water, but for us to realize that this might have been an issue that was invisible to you before. And we want to make that issue visible so we can address it. So that's our challenge. One of the challenges from the Economic Vitality Committee as part of the Design Committee. This is something that we need to address to figure out how we can make this work. We need developers to make money. We need businesses to make money. That's how this stuff works. And what we prefer is that if we can get development partners from our neighborhood, if we can get business owners from our neighborhood, that's what we want to do because that's how we build local wealth. But all this is tied together. Now I get to turn it over to Randy, and actually Randy's going to end it with some inspirational stuff, and I can't wait for you to see it. But I know we're going to take questions at the end. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Joe. Good morning. My name is Randy Wilson. I'm with Community Design Solutions based in Columbia, South Carolina, where I also have the privilege of serving as the consulting architect to Main Street, South Carolina. And Joe, as an architect and creative, I want to thank you for explaining that last bit of information for somebody like me, a creative who is allergic to spreadsheets. Even I could understand that. And so I thank you for raising my bar of knowledge about those kinds of issues. Before I get into the actual buildings that I had the privilege of studying this week, I felt like it was important to just take one brief moment and talk about some key principles related to the Main Street approach to design, and this is the reason why. You're rarely going to hear an architect, in my case a recovering architect, say this out loud: while design is important, it's not all important. It is absolutely important because it is the visual manifestation of our place, but it's not all important, as Joe just illustrated. Even if we were to make everything look pretty, if we don't address the underlying economy of place, we run the risk of having a very attractive ghost town. And so it's important that we not only look good, but we actually are good. But the reason design is important is based on this very simple fact from the world of sociology. Sociologists tell us that people form their initial impressions and opinions about another human being within 3 seconds of meeting them. It's based on everything from their height to their weight, their hair color, their skin color, the patterns of speech, their body language. And if that's true of people, I'm 100% convinced it's true of place. Whether we like it or not, the visual appearance of our place affects people's impressions and opinions and judgments about us. If we were in church, that's where you would say, amen, okay? So I just want to address this from this simple standpoint. As human beings, we have to crawl before we walk. We have to walk before we run, and we have to kind of jog before we sprint. And in the Main Street world of downtown revitalization, it is the same is true of our built environment. Before we can do the difficult redevelopments, before we can do overall building renovations, we have to address things in the short term to buy us time to do those more difficult, more costly matters. So by way of example, almost every place I work in, all across America, there's always going to be some percentage of vacant buildings. And you can tolerate a few, but if you have a lot, then all of a sudden people can give a false impression and they ascribe to you a perception that may not be true at all, that this place isn't good for business. And so one of the ways that we can take the edge off that is what we call vacant building treatments. Now, the most important thing you need to hear in this sentence is the word temporary. These are not permanent solutions, but they're temporary solutions that can buy us time as we occupy these buildings with sustainable businesses. And so whether it's pop-up art, vinyl clings, pop-up museums, anything that we can put in those storefront windows to take the edge and the oppression off the fact that the building is empty. And sometimes you can actually kill two birds with one stone. This is Conway, South Carolina. These are simple 11 by 17 posters. I mentioned the dimension because it implies that you can print these off of your home color LaserJet printer. And these were simple statements about people and why they love Conway, South Carolina. why they chose to put their business here, why they chose to run for office here, why they chose to educate their children here. And what's so beautiful is this is a 100% vacant building. But you don't really care. I mean, you care, but the point is, because you're reading these statements of people you see at church or in the grocery store your kids go to school with, it has the added benefit of kind of building community pride. And we saw that the last time we were here. We put forth some of those advertisements about people who are making a difference in this community. People just kind of puffed up with pride about Pride of Place in Delmar. And so that would be one strategy to address these vacant buildings. We didn't have time to kind of do a full rendering of the Bi-State bus garage. But if I can just say it with all humility, that is one dreadful wall. I mean, the experience of walking beside that for what feels like a half of a mile is just not a very enjoyable experience. And so I would suggest that we approach the powers that be. Are there some things that we could do in the short term to kind of soften that edge in that wall? And at the top of my list would be things like green or living walls, interspersed with panelized murals, both of which would be highlighted by attractive lighting, either coming up or down, depending on the day and the time. And that way we would break up the rhythm of this long, monotonous wall with something that is enjoyable, easy to look at, and a much softer edge. Just a word about design education. It was so fun just walking around the other day with Rhonda and Tony and who else we were here? Guy was here, Erica was here, Lisa. And what we noticed is Guy, I don't know if I mentioned Guy, we've started falling in love with your buildings again because we noticed some things that we just didn't notice when we drove, but when you stop and you walk and you investigate these buildings, you realize these really special moments. All right, I got to have credit where credit's due. This photograph, oh no, go back. Here we go. Whoops. This photograph right here was taken by Guy. Everybody, Guy, wave at everybody, wherever you are. Okay. So, do y'all know where that is? Well, first of all, is Lathan in the room? Okay, is Lathan in the room? Okay, you know. So, Lathan, I need to ask permission. May I refer to your building as the Batman building? Okay, because to me, it belongs on the set of Batman, and I mean that in the best possible way. It is one of the most wicked, coolest buildings I've ever seen in my entire life. This is at the very top of the entry. Can y'all read what it says? The Bolivar, yeah. In this really wonderful dark Art Deco font. It's an exquisite thing. So years ago in the town of Orangeburg, South Carolina, we did these 3 things in succession. And I would kind of encourage you to do it here in Delmar because every parent in the room knows this to be true about your kids. Your kids learn best when they don't know they're learning. Can I get an amen? Okay? You got to make learning fun. So what we did is we first held a photo contest. And you know this is an old idea because I was actually using a camera instead of my phone, all right? And so the challenge was you go around downtown Orangeburg, in your place, Delmar Boulevard, and you take photographs only of architectural details. And then you create a pop-up gallery. You take one of those vacant buildings, you put all the photos in there, and you award a winner for that contest. Then you do step number 2. Step number 2 is now somebody has to go on the scavenger hunt and find all of the architectural details that were listed in this photo pop-up, and that person wins an award as well. And then the third step, and you have your choice here, you can develop posters. If you've seen the Doors of London posters, this would be the details of Delmar. And you could sell this as a fundraiser. Now, the last thing you can do is with a little bit of Photoshop help, and I'm happy to show you how, you can take a photograph and convert it into a line drawing and make it a coloring book for your children. Because I would love for you to have your kids coloring and learning about the history of Collier Brothers Auto, as you're going to see in just a second, or learn the history of what I'm going to call affectionately the Batman building. And so, again, a way to teach our kids about the beauty of Delmar and its buildings without them even knowing that they're learning. The last thing I want to say before we jump into the buildings is something we said at the last meeting. If you hadn't figured out already, I'm a part-time preacher. Okay, so there's a passage of scripture that says, don't despise the day of small things. And I think that is true in terms of downtown revitalization as well. Don't despise the day of small things. Sometimes we have to do little things before we can do the big things. And one of the things that we recommended last time was vibrancy amenities. And vibrancy amenities are these very small infusions of color activity and interactivity that are born out of, interactive games, whether it's cornhole or bocce or giant Jenga or giant checkers, giant chess. It's the colorful bistro tables and chairs and umbrellas. It's the interactive musical instruments that your kids get to play. It's the before I die, I want to fill in the chalkboard. And it's all of these things that people can do and interact with that it can occur at a fraction of the cost of difficult and expensive facade renovations and or streetscape enhancements. Now here's the part I hate to admit out loud. In terms of just visual appeal, you're going to get an initial bang for your buck off of this more than you will some of those harder gestures. And so it's a great place to start your efforts here. If you will please receive this statement as a positive and not meant negative in any ways. It's like sometimes you have to fake it till you make it, okay? And these are just affordable ways to just populate the place with these wonderful moments of color, activity, and animation. And so now it's my pleasure to show you some of the facade renderings that we worked in. And again, I just want to commend Rhonda and Tony, Erica, Guy, Lisa. You all could not have picked 5 better buildings for me to be able to work with. And for the property owners of those buildings, I want to say a sincere thank you for taking time to meet with me and tell me about your aspirations for the building. And I sincerely hope that what you see honors what you told me. Now, if you're in the room and you're a praying person, you need to pray for those property owners because they haven't seen what they're about to see, okay? They have put a whole lot of trust in me, and we're about to see if it was merited or not. Oh, no, don't go yet. Okay, so here's the Batman building. Where's Lathan again? Dude, I love this building. I've been an architect for, I think, over 30 years. I have never in my whole entire life seen a building like this. I mean, that terracotta tile and then the glazed tile and the Art Deco entrance, you can just ask anybody I was with. I mean, I was speechless. And they asked me, like, what is this style? I'm like, I don't know. And it's part Deco, it's part Byzantine, it's part Aztec. At the end of the day, I said, I frankly think it's Batman. I just think it looks like it belongs on the set of Batman. So now everybody needs to, what's that? So one of the things that y'all need to help Lathan and cut him some slack on is, do you understand that because this building is so heavily ornamented, and the majority of that ornament, as you can see, is this dark, almost gray-black color, he has a lot of limitations in terms of infusing this with pops of color. All right, so in other words, that's the hand he's been dealt. And so understand what you're about to see are going to be very, very subtle improvements, but I'm going to walk you through them. So this is the existing conditions, and these are the proposed. And I'm going to move you left to right, and then we're going to zoom in. So left to right is an existing salon and supplies. Here is a business, and I'm going to talk about that business in a second. I'm going to embarrass somebody at the same time. This is going to be a bar and grill, and then the final one is a restaurant. You can see it has a roll-up garage door and outdoor dining. Now let's zoom in a little bit. So in this second bay, in your midst today is somebody very famous. She doesn't want you to know this, but I'm going to let you know. You have a Columbia-trained interior designer in your midst, in Miss Lauren. And so Lauren, I'm being kind of prophetic. I want to see you open up an interior design firm in that space, okay? Lathan, she's right behind you. Okay, all right, okay. Okay, Nona's is affectionately called the bar and the lounge that comes next, and then this Market Cafe would be the cafe with the roll-up doors and the outdoor dining. Now, as I alluded to, I don't know if you can see right here, because of the solar orientation, the sunlight just beats on this building in the late afternoon. And so he needs some solar relief. And so we're going to use retractable awnings. But before I extended the awnings in the rendering, I want to explain the color choice. Here is that fabulous, fabulous jaw-dropping entry right here. All this glazed tile, real Byzantine looking. And then again, this unglazed that almost looks very Aztec. But look at this wonderful sort of deco period color in this sort of pale green and beige. And so that's the color I chose for the awnings when they're fully extended. And so that way we've kind of introduced these other two colors in addition to the charcoal and the terracotta. Now we've also introduced this sort of pale green and pale yellow. And if you're a color theory expert, then you know part of the reason that works, it's a triadic. In other words, it's 3 colors that are equidistant on the color wheel. And so that's Lathan's Batman building in the after, and I hope we like it. Mr. Stan Luckett right here, thank you so much for meeting with me. And I think if you're familiar with the neighborhood, that you know that unfortunately, well, let's start with the positives. This establishment's been around for a long, long time. It's a great fixture in your neighborhood, but unfortunately, they experienced a fire. And so in the rebuilding process, we pondered some ideas about ways to improve this. Now, I want you to pay attention to some existing details. We're going to zoom in a second. This entire facade is covered with white porcelain glazed brick. This stuff is exquisite. And then around the window surrounds are these two tones of green glazed brick. And as you're about to see, up detailed would be these wonderful sort of lion's head keystones. So here's the after photo. And you can see some of the features. Of course, we're going to replace the windows. We're going to install a canopy, fix up the transom, and then go back after we remove the plywood, restore it back to the wood storefront that would have existed something similar to this. I really wrestled, Mr. Luckett, with whether that storefront should be painted green or white, but ultimately I decided on white just because of the presence of all the white glazed tile. It just seemed to be the character of the building, and so I just kind of wanted to honor that. But as we zoom in, I'm going to get to your name on the window. These are some of the details I want to make sure you see in case you haven't paid attention. Or when we have the photo contest, you can be sure to go photograph these, okay? So you can see the glazed tile. Again, I love this two-tone green, and look at these lion's head keystones, just exquisite details on this building. And look what happens down below. He's got this wonderful transom glass. We installed a canopy so that you could both get light above it to illuminate the stained glass, but it would protect the storefront underneath. And Mr. Luckett, I hope I just took your name and did two tones of green, just like the tile up above for Luckett's Lounge. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. So this is Collier Brothers Auto Body. I mean, I love this building. Again, y'all's buildings are amazing. For those who might not be familiar, Crest buildings that were built all across America, this building utilizes the exact same polychromatic stone that are used on Crest buildings all across America. And again, you can sort of see these pale green and blue diamond medallions that are in it. And over time, they've made some necessary changes to bring this use into the 21st century. I respect the fact that this facade just gets beat to death by the sun every afternoon. And so they needed to reduce some of the window sizes and things of that nature. But what we decided to do is some very subtle things that would allow it to maintain its current setup. And by that I mean these ribbon windows let the brick come up a little bit higher, but can we also take it a little bit back towards its historic roots? Most notably, can we restore the transom with some replication, not real, but replication leaded glass? And then over here behind this, and this was their idea, by the way, this wasn't even mine, was replication glass block, which would be a very durable building material, but it would also allow diffuse light to come in, but it would be resilient to damage. And I should have mentioned this to all the property owners. I will send you the original JPEGs of the before and after, so feel free to take photos, but I'll send those to you as well. So we're going to start on the overall, and then we're going to zoom in on each side. So this is the after. And one of the things you may have noticed in the previous photograph is man, I feel sorry for you, but apparently a car ran into this corner of the building. And so you can see the pilaster that was here was knocked off. And so we're advocating in the after to either see if you can find replication material, and if not, just do it out of stucco, but to match. And then everything over here is not stone. This is just stucco to match the stone over here. And we simplified the detail to just have a few colored medallions. Now, the thing that I hope unifies it is you can see once we put the replication transom, it has a terrible name, by the way. It's called crinkle glass, which I think is a horrible name, but still it works, is just painting all of this, sort of this I would call it a warm bronze color. And because I think it just goes really well with sort of the pale yellow of the stone, and it's just a nice relationship. And if you pay attention, those are the colors that you used in your projecting sign. And so just by virtue of painting the garage doors, white, especially in a sun-facing facade, is always going to be glaring and bright. And so the bronze just kind of tones it down. Oh, I'm sorry, I should have gone even forward. So here you can see the details even better. And again, just like before, a canopy instead of an awning, so that we can both get light above in the transom as well as protection for pedestrians and the storefront below. And then bollards so that we can prevent cars from hitting your store again. And then on the other side, again, this is just replication. Don't tell anybody, but it's plastic glass block. It's not even glass block, it's plastic. And then what I love to do is just simply take vinyl cling letters and apply it onto the glass block so that you kind of get this really wonderful texture that bleeds through. And again, we're just picking up on that pale yellow that you had on your projecting sign. And then over to the right, they want to develop the grassed lot into a parking lot so that patrons don't have to cross the street back and forth to get to their current parking lot. But guess what? This is my favorite side of their building. Now, everybody in the room, you have to make me a promise. If you have not gone into the lobby waiting room of their business, you must. It is literally a historic museum of the history of this place, the business, and its people. And it is wonderful. And make sure, Craig or Wayne or Lauren tell you the story, because it's just a fabulous, fabulous story. Well, the reason this wall is so important is this is what that wall looks like when you come from downtown towards Delmar. I mean, you literally, your view, the axis is terminated by their wall. And so it's a very, very, very important wall in the life of Delmar. And so paying homage to their history, these are photos from their lobby, painted in a sepia tone, and it just kind of tells pictorially the history of their place. And I apologize, I had to put the Collier Brothers auto body down here because I didn't want to cover up Craig's face, so anyway. And again, Lauren, you asked about it, but there's the door in the side. And I just simply ran out of time. Again, this would be converted at some point into their parking garage, that parking lot. Carlton, where's Carlton? Can I get an amen? Is this not one of the best developments in your district? I mean, not only is the architecture exquisite, but the art housed within it is just spectacular. It's world-class caliber, and I love the mission statement that you have for that place, Carlton, and my best wishes for a successful future as well. He has ambition because it's been such a popular venue. It is used almost equal parts as a gallery as well as a meeting venue, wedding receptions, and things of that nature. But it has limited capacity in its current state, and so again, this is his vision, not mine. He intentionally left this development pad roughly 20 feet wide, 100 feet deep, so that he could create an auxiliary venue space that could either be freestanding or connect to the existing property and gallery. And so again, his program of work was to build on the existing architecture, and it just works. I mean, Carlton, when you give me architecture as good as you have, any architect worth their salt should be able to do a good addition for you. But to walk you through, oh, sorry, let's go back. Whoa, no, we just gave it away. Okay. Dadgummit. It was nice. All right, so the same entry feature as the current Exodus Gallery, but on the top, it has a rooftop space and outdoor dining, a mural that'll just draw people's eyes up there. The access to the rooftop would happen at the landing inside the building in the back. We have string lights, and of course underneath here would probably be tables and chairs and umbrellas. And then 3 roll-up garage bays so that depending on the weather, you could either have indoor or outdoor spillover space, but with some deep canopies to kind of help with solar protection if the sun is too hot. But last but not least, we have Jolanda. Now, Jolanda, I'm going to really embarrass you. I need you to stand up for me real quick, please. All right, everybody pay attention to Jolanda's sweater. Is that not a good-looking sweater? All right, so that's Jolanda's favorite color. She told me, we were talking colors, and she, not me, she came up with a great logo for this business venture. And I said, well, what colors do you like? She says, man, burnt orange is my favorite color, i.e. her sweater. So pay attention. So her program of work here, this is just, man, I'm so excited about this. It's to be a combination thrift store consignment shop, co-work space, and cafe. But she didn't want her cafe to just be limited to the inside of this building, but she wanted it to spill out on a rooftop above and to the courtyard to the side. And she also had a vision for a mezzanine that would kind of wrap around the interior. And so what you're going to see is we're going to raise the height of this building a half story so we can accommodate a mezzanine on the inside and then rooftop animation on the outside. And so existing conditions, and here's the after conditions. And again, this is, there's Jolanda's orange. Look at that. So again, the program, these two, good Lord, these two windows are at the mezzanine level, roll-up door for the cafe, entry into the co-work, roll-up for the consignment thrift store, upper floor dining activities, and of course the side courtyard dining as well. Just to zoom in, again, this is Jolanda's favorite orange. That is her logo. Isn't that a great logo? And I think the name is very appropriate for the building itself. Are we going to remix it and mix things up? Yeah, if you haven't read her mission statement for this property, you should. It's very, very inspiring. So again, before and after. So thank you so much for your time this morning.